5:12 local time. Northern Arabian Sea. The ocean is unusually calm. The wind is light, the sky is clear, and visibility stretches for miles. USS Gerald R. Ford, the most advanced aircraft carrier ever built, moves steadily across open water at 18 knots. From far away, she appears almost frozen in place, a 100,000-ton island of steel gliding silently through deep blue water. On the flight deck, the morning cycle is just beginning. Deck crews move between parked F/A-18 Super Hornets, securing gear and preparing the first patrol launch of the day. But below the deck, the quiet routine is already beginning to shift. Inside the Combat Information Center, radar screens glow in the dim light. Green sweeps rotate across the displays. Dozens of contacts move across the digital map. Commercial shipping lanes, distant cargo vessels, fishing boats scattered across the horizon. Then a new contact appears. Bearing 041. Range 28 nautical miles. One radar operator leans closer to his screen. A new surface contact. A second mark appears behind it. Then a third. 3 ships. Tight formation. Speed 16 knots. At first glance, nothing seems unusual. That speed could match normal naval patrol movement, but their heading is what changes the mood in the room. All 3 vessels are moving directly toward the strike group. The system begins comparing hull signatures. A few seconds later, the identification appears on screen. Iranian Navy. Inside the CIC, nobody raises their voice. They do not need to. The officer of the watch marks the track. 3 surface contacts, Iranian naval units, bearing steady. On the bridge, the information arrives almost instantly through the ship's internal network. Outside, nothing seems different. The sea remains calm. The carrier continues on course. But inside the ship, every sensor is now focused on those 3 contacts. At 5:14, the radar updates again. Speed increase. The Iranian ships accelerate from 16 knots to 21, then 24. Their formation tightens. Instead of spreading out, the 3 vessels draw closer together, shaping into a shallow triangle as they continue closing the distance. One CIC supervisor studies the screen carefully, course unchanged. They are still coming straight in. At 22 nautical miles, the strike group begins the first step of standard maritime procedure. Radio communication. A message is sent across open frequencies. Iranian naval vessels approaching United States carrier strike group. This is a U.S. Navy vessel operating in international waters. Alter course immediately and maintain safe distance. The message moves across the water. No response. The Iranian ships keep coming. On the radar display, their speed rises again. 27 knots. That is no longer a simple patrol speed. That is an intercept course. Inside the CIC, the watch team adjusts posture without a single shouted command. New data streams open across the displays. Long-range optics turn toward the incoming vessels. Electronic sensors begin recording their emissions. At 5:16, the range closes to 19 miles. Then the radar operators notice something else. One of the Iranian ships has activated its surface search radar. The signal appears on the electronic warfare display as a thin line of static. They are actively scanning us. The phrase moves quietly through the room. That kind of scan means they are measuring distance, speed, direction, and movement. They are gathering precise tracking information. The officer of the watch nods once. Log it. Above them, the bridge remains controlled and quiet. The captain stands behind the forward windows, looking toward the horizon through binoculars. From this distance, the Iranian ships are still invisible to the human eye, hidden beyond the curve of the Earth. But the carrier's sensors can see them clearly. At 5:17, the Iranian vessels accelerate again, 30 knots. For ships of their size, that means full power. Their triangular formation becomes sharper. All 3 hulls angle slightly inward toward the center of the strike group. This is no longer routine shadowing. This is deliberate pressure. Back inside the Combat Information Center, a new signal suddenly spikes across the electronic warfare display. A different radar signature. Stronger, more focused, much narrower. The technician leans forward. Precision tracking radar detected. That changes everything. A search radar observes. A precision tracking radar does something far more serious. It locks attention onto a specific object and follows it closely. For a moment, the room becomes completely still. The officer of the watch looks at the range counter. 16 nautical miles. Closing fast. He reaches for the intercom. Bridge, CIC. Iranian surface group has activated precision tracking radar. A short pause follows. Then the captain's voice comes back, calm and measured. Understood. Across the carrier strike group, defensive systems begin shifting to a higher readiness level. And high above, on the flight deck, crews around the waiting fighters start moving faster. A Seahawk helicopter begins spinning its rotors, the sound rising across the flight deck as crews move with growing urgency. Inside the Combat Information Center, another radar operator suddenly speaks louder than before. Launch activity detected. The screens confirm it almost instantly. Infrared sensors register 3 intense heat signatures bursting from the decks of the Iranian warships. For half a second, they appear only as bright points on the display. Then the flight paths form. 3 incoming projectiles flying low over the sea headed straight toward the carrier strike group. The operator does not pause. Incoming threats. 3 confirmed. In that instant, the peaceful surface of the Arabian Sea changes completely. Somewhere beyond the horizon, 3 fast-moving weapons are now racing toward the most powerful aircraft carrier on Earth. 5:19 local time. Inside the Combat Information Center of USS Gerald R. Ford, 3 tracks cut across the radar display. Thin red lines stretch over the digital map of the ocean, moving low and fast. Sea skimming profile. Speed just below Mach 1. The officer of the watch gives the order immediately. Confirm tracks. The radar operator answers without looking away from the screen. 3 incoming threats. Bearing 041. Range 14 miles. At barely 30 feet above the waves, the weapons are designed to blend into the clutter of the ocean surface. The idea is simple. Stay low, stay fast, and leave the defender with only seconds to react. But the carrier strike group has already detected them. High above the fleet, an E-2D Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft catches the launch signatures moments after ignition. Its radar sweeps far across the sea, sending targeting data directly into the Aegis Combat Network, protecting the ships below. Inside CIC, the system begins calculating the intercept path instantly. Time to impact. 90 seconds. The destroyer screen reacts before anyone on the carrier can see the incoming tracks with their own eyes. 8 miles ahead of the carrier, USS Arleigh Burke shifts from patrol status to full defensive engagement. Deep inside the ship, the vertical launch system unlocks. Metal hatches open across the forward deck. A command moves through the tactical network. Engage. 2 SM-2 standard interceptors ignite inside their launch cells. From the carrier's bridge, sailors see twin columns of flame burst from the destroyer's bow as the interceptors climb into the sky. For a moment, they rise almost straight upward, leaving white trails across the morning air. Then they turn, roll, and dive toward the incoming tracks, guided by radar data shared across the entire strike group. Inside CIC, the countdown begins. SM-2 away. The first interceptor meets one of the incoming weapons high above the ocean. On radar, the contact turns into a sudden burst of static. 1 track disappears. 2 remain. The surviving weapons adjust automatically, dropping even closer to the surface as they continue forward. At that height, the curve of the Earth helps hide them from long-range radar until the final moments. Range, 8 miles. Impact in 40 seconds. The strike group's layered defense moves to the next stage. Another destroyer in the screen, USS Mason, locks onto the 2 remaining tracks. ESSM ready. The evolved Sea Sparrow missile was built for moments exactly like this. Fast, agile, and designed to stop threats that break through the outer defensive ring. 2 more launch cells open. Twin interceptors race away from the destroyer, leaving twisting white trails behind them. Inside CIC, the radar operator follows the closing geometry. Intercept in 5, 4, 3. A bright flash appears across the radar scope. Another track vanishes. Only 1 remains. Now the numbers are changing by the second. Range, 4 miles. Time to impact, 15 seconds. The final incoming weapon is moving just above the waves, its guidance system fixed on the enormous radar signature of the aircraft carrier. At this distance, the destroyers no longer have enough time to reach it. The final layer of defense belongs to the carrier itself. On the forward section of USS Gerald R. Ford, the Phalanx close-in weapon system snaps into motion. The white dome above the carrier's structure rotates toward the approaching threat. Inside the mount, a 6-barrel 20mm Gatling system spins up with a sharp mechanical whine. Target locked. Range 1,500 yards. The system engages. The sound cuts through the morning air, a rapid metallic roar as a dense stream of rounds races toward the incoming track. From the flight deck, sailors see a glowing line of tracer fire stretch across the sea. The final threat enters the defensive cloud. For half a second, it keeps moving forward. Then it breaks apart. A massive burst of fire flashes across the water, barely 1,000 yards from the carrier's bow. Fragments scatter outward and fall into the sea, missing the ship completely. The final incoming weapon is gone. Inside the Combat Information Center, the radar operator finally exhales. All 3 targets neutralized, but the relief lasts only a few seconds. The radar picture updates again. The 3 Iranian warships are still closing, and this time the infrared sensors detect something even more concerning. New heat signatures appear across their decks. The launch rails are opening again. The officer of the watch leans closer to the display. 3 new signatures ignite almost at the same time. Another wave. 3 more incoming weapons rise from the Iranian ships, their motors burning bright as they climb for a brief moment, then drop low toward the surface of the ocean. The radar operator reacts immediately, second wave inbound. Across the entire carrier strike group, alarms sound once more. And now everyone understands the situation clearly. This is no longer a message, this is a direct confrontation. 5:21 local time. The second wave appears on radar before the smoke from the first intercept has even faded beyond the horizon. 3 new tracks, low over the water, moving fast. Inside the Combat Information Center aboard USS Gerald R. Ford, the digital map flashes red again as the incoming vectors update in real time. Range, 16 nautical miles. Time to impact, just over 1 minute. But this time, the carrier strike group is already ahead of the threat. High above the fleet, 2 F/A-18 Super Hornets circle in a combat air patrol pattern. They had launched only minutes earlier for routine overwatch, but now their mission changes instantly. The lead pilot hears the call in his headset. Multiple incoming threats. Vector 042. His radar screen lights up with 3 small returns racing toward the strike group. But then something else appears behind them. A faint airborne contact. Higher altitude. Slower speed. Inside the E-2D Hawkeye, the weapons systems officer identifies it first. Iranian targeting drone. The small aircraft is flying several thousand feet above the low-flying weapons, acting as a relay. From that height, it can track the carrier's position and send course corrections to the incoming systems. Without that relay, their guidance becomes far less effective. In the Super Hornet cockpit, the lead pilot reacts immediately. Contact confirmed. He banks the aircraft hard to the right, dropping altitude as he accelerates toward the drone. Speed passes 500 knots. Below him, the ocean blurs into streaks of blue and white foam. Behind him, his wingman follows. Back inside the carrier's CIC, the defensive network continues calculating intercept paths. The destroyers prepare their systems once again, but the air wing is already moving first. The Super Hornet's radar locks onto the drone. Distance, 18 miles. The pilot selects his weapon. AIM-12. Oh, ready. The drone continues its steady orbit above the incoming tracks, unaware of the fighter closing the distance. The pilot presses the trigger. Fox 3. The AIM-12 AMRAAM leaves the fighter's wing in a sharp flash and accelerates toward the high-altitude target. A few seconds pass. Then the radar return vanishes. The Iranian drone breaks apart high above the sea. Back in CIC, the tactical display updates immediately. The incoming weapons lose their mid-course guidance. Without the drone sending corrections, their paths begin to drift. One veers several degrees off course, another starts moving unevenly just above the waves. But they are still dangerous. At that altitude, even a weapon that has lost guidance can cause serious damage if it reaches the carrier. The destroyers fire again. 2 ESSM interceptors launch from USS Mason, racing toward the unstable tracks. The first incoming weapon is stopped 6 miles from the carrier. The second disappears moments later in a bright flash over the ocean. Only one remains. But now its path is unstable, shifting slightly left and right as its seeker tries to reacquire the carrier's radar signature. Inside the second Super Hornet cockpit, the wingman watches the final track. I've got visual. He pushes the throttle forward. The jet surges ahead. Altitude drops to just 200 feet above the waves. He lines up behind the incoming weapon, closing the gap fast. From the cockpit, it looks like a white spear racing over the surface of the sea. The pilot steadies the aircraft and selects his weapon, Sidewinder. The AIM-9X tone sounds in his headset as the infrared seeker locks onto the heat trail ahead. He fires. The Sidewinder leaps forward. 5 seconds later, it reaches the Iranian projectile. A bright flash erupts just above the water, sending fragments across the surface of the sea. The second wave is gone. Inside the Combat Information Center, the radar picture clears once again. But the operators are no longer focused only on the skies. They are watching something even more urgent. The 3 Iranian warships are still closing in. Distance, 13 miles. Speed, 31 knots. And their launch rails are still glowing hot. The carrier strike group has intercepted 2 full incoming waves, but the danger has not passed. High above the fleet, the 2 Super Hornets bank sharply and circle back toward the Iranian vessels. From this altitude, the pilots can finally see them clearly. 3 gray hulls cutting across the water at high speed. Thin trails of smoke still rise from their launch systems. Inside CIC, the captain's voice comes through the command network. Enough. The defensive posture changes in an instant. Until now, the carrier strike group has been focused on protecting itself from the incoming threat. But now the mission changes. The order is clear. Stop the launch platforms. The Super Hornet pilots roll their aircraft into a steep descent, accelerating toward the Iranian warships below. And for the first time since the first launch, the confrontation shifts from defense to direct response. 5:25 local time. The two F/A-18 Super Hornets leave their holding pattern and descend toward the ocean. Altitude drops quickly. 5,000 feet, 3,000, 1,000. Below them, the Arabian Sea stretches in every direction, calm and almost unreal in its silence. But ahead, 3 Iranian warships cut aggressive wakes through the water, still moving at full speed toward the carrier strike group. Inside the lead Super Hornet's cockpit, the targeting display stabilizes. 3 surface contacts, range 12 miles. The pilot tilts the aircraft slightly left, giving the radar a cleaner angle. The system identifies the ships almost instantly. Each hull appears as a sharp, solid shape against the moving clutter of the sea. Behind him, his wingman confirms the same picture. 3 contacts locked. Back aboard USS Gerald R. Ford, the order moves through the strike group's encrypted network. Neutralize the launch platforms. There is no hesitation. The Super Hornet's weapons panel lights up. A GM-84 Harpoon selected. The system was built for moments like this. Low over the water, radar-guided, designed to reach hostile ships before they have time to react. The lead pilot steadies the aircraft. Speed, 540 knots. Altitude, 300 feet. At that height, the jet is barely above the surface. The ocean races beneath the canopy in flashes of blue and white. The target range drops fast, 9 miles. The radar locks onto the lead Iranian warship, the same vessel that initiated the first launch sequence. The targeting box turns solid. The pilot presses the trigger, harpoon away. The missile drops cleanly from the wing and ignites a split second later, its motor pushing it forward across the sea. Immediately, it dives lower, just 20 feet above the water. Its radar seeker activates and fixes onto the large metal hull ahead. The Super Hornet banks sharply away as soon as the weapon clears the aircraft. Behind him, the wingman lines up his own shot. Second harpoon away. 2 low-flying anti-ship weapons now race across the water, nearly hidden inside the ocean's radar clutter. On the Iranian ships, the warning comes too late. The lead vessel's radar catches the incoming threat for only a moment. At that altitude, there are seconds to respond, not minutes. Crew members on deck turn toward the horizon, then the first harpoon reaches the lead warship. It strikes the starboard side just above the waterline. A massive flash erupts from the hull as the impact tears through internal compartments. Fire bursts outward. Smoke rises in a thick column. The vessel immediately begins leaning to port, its deck structures damaged and burning. But the response is not finished. 3 seconds later, the second harpoon reaches the second Iranian warship. It hits near the rear launch section. The impact triggers a chain of secondary flashes as stored fuel and onboard ordnance ignite. The entire rear section of the vessel is swallowed by a massive burst of fire and dark smoke. The shockwave rolls across the surface of the sea. Inside the Super Hornet cockpit, the pilot glances down for only a moment. 2 ships are now burning, but the third Iranian vessel is still moving. Instead of stopping, it turns sharply to port and begins accelerating away from the carrier strike group. Its speed rises past 30 knots as the crew attempts to break away from the area. Back inside the Combat Information Center aboard USS Gerald R. Ford, radar operators track the maneuver immediately. Third vessel changing course. But by now, the strike group has already closed the trap. High above the water, an MH-60R Seahawk helicopter has moved into position. Its sensors lock onto the fleeing ship, and its targeting system sends precise coordinates directly into the fleet's combat network. Seconds later, another ship in the formation responds. From the forward deck of the guided missile destroyer USS Mason, a launch cell opens. A single interceptor rises in a column of flame. For a brief moment, it climbs almost straight upward. Then it turns toward the horizon and races across the sea, guided by the Seahawk's live targeting data. The Iranian vessel continues its hard turn, engines pushing at full power as the crew tries to outrun what is coming, but the distance closes quickly. Less than 30 seconds later, the missile reaches the ship. It strikes near the center of the hull, sending a powerful burst upward through the deck. Flames rise into the air as thick black smoke spreads over the water. Within moments, the vessel begins losing speed. Then it stops completely. High above the scene, the 2 Super Hornets circle back toward the carrier strike group. Below them, the result is clear. 3 Iranian warships are disabled, 2 are burning heavily, the third is drifting without power. The confrontation that began only minutes earlier has fallen into an uneasy silence, broken only by the sound of fires burning across the damaged vessels. But inside the carrier strike group, no one celebrates. Because the mission was never about celebration, the mission was control. And once again, the sea around the fleet is under control. 5:28 local time. The flashes across the Arabian Sea begin to fade. 3 dark columns of smoke rise above the water, slowly drifting with the morning wind. Debris floats between the damaged Iranian ships. Their engines are silent now. Their wakes dissolve into the calm ocean behind them. At 10,000 feet, the two F/A-18 Super Hornets circle the area in wide arcs. The pilots scan the scene through their targeting systems. All three vessels are disabled. One is leaning heavily to port, flames rising from the launcher deck. Another is damaged near the stern, its rear structure collapsed into a twisted shape of metal and smoke. The third sits motionless, with smoke climbing through openings torn across the center of the hull. Inside the lead fighter, the pilot sends the update. 3 targets neutralized. Back aboard USS Gerald R. Ford, the message reaches the Combat Information Center within seconds. Radar operators confirm the same picture. All 3 hostile surface contacts have stopped moving. Speed, 0 knots, no new radar signals, no launch signatures. The officer of the watch gives a single nod. Threat neutralized. Across the carrier strike group, the pressure that has filled every compartment for the past 15 minutes begins to ease. But the fleet does not stand down. Post-engagement procedures begin immediately. High above the strike group, the E-2D Hawkeye continues sweeping the horizon with its radar dome, searching for any additional aircraft or ships approaching the area. Nothing appears. Electronic warfare systems scan for new radar activity. Silence. No further Iranian signals. On the carrier's flight deck, another MH-60R Seahawk lifts into the air. Its rotors beat against the ocean wind as it moves toward the damaged ships to document the aftermath. The helicopter crew activates its sensors. Infrared cameras record the fires still burning on the vessels. High-resolution optics zoom in on the damaged decks. Every image is time-stamped, geolocated, and transmitted back into the strike group's intelligence systems. In modern naval operations, evidence can matter almost as much as firepower. Back on the carrier's bridge, the captain lowers his binoculars. Through the forward glass, he can barely make out the distant columns of smoke rising over the horizon. The entire engagement lasted less than 15 minutes. 3 incoming waves, 3 launch platforms disabled. The captain speaks into the command circuit, his voice steady, log the engagement. Inside the Combat Information Center, every detail is recorded with precision. The time of the first launch, each intercept sequence, the moment the air wing received authorization, the final confirmation that all hostile platforms had stopped moving. Every second is documented, every radar track is stored, because in a carrier strike group, nothing is left to memory. The Super Hornets make one final pass over the disabled vessels before turning back toward the fleet. Their engines roll across the sky as they accelerate toward the carrier. Within minutes, the massive flight deck of USS Gerald R. Ford appears beneath them, stretching across the ocean like a floating runway. One by one, the fighters line up for recovery. The first jet touches down, catches the arresting cable, and comes to a hard stop. Then the second follows. Deck crews move in immediately, guiding the aircraft into position. Engines power down, the pilots climb out, helmets still in their hands. No one cheers. There is no celebration, only quiet professionalism. Because for the sailors aboard the strike group, this is not a story about victory. It is a reminder of something far more important. An aircraft carrier never operates alone. USS Gerald R. Ford may be the largest and most advanced warship ever built, but its strength comes from the network around it. Destroyers with layered defensive systems, airborne radar watching hundreds of miles of sky and sea. Strike fighters able to reach threats far beyond the horizon. Satellites, sensors, helicopters, and command systems all feeding information into one coordinated force. When those 3 Iranian warships launched their attack, they were not challenging one ship. They were challenging an entire fleet, and a fleet does not respond as separate pieces. It responds as one system. The Seahawk helicopter makes one more circle above the damaged vessels, recording the final images before turning back toward the carrier. Behind it, the 3 disabled ships drift silently across the open water. The smoke begins to thin. The sea slowly takes back its calm. And within the carrier strike group, operations continue. Jets refuel. Radar systems keep scanning the horizon. Sailors return to their stations. Because out here, far from any coastline, the mission never truly pauses. The ocean may look peaceful, but every sailor in the strike group understands the reality. At sea, the next threat can appear without warning, and when it does, the fleet will be ready.